Welcome back to another episode of Strife's Talking Points, where today I'm going to go over a little bit of yesterday's news. House Judiciary Committee holds hearings on the Mueller report, the live stream. This live stream comes to you from CBS, a news source I use a lot of times kind of to debunk what they're saying or to show you how things are framed in reality. This man you see in front of you is John Dean. He is a man who's kind of been out of politics more or less since the 1970s. Why is he coming for you today? Because he was one of the legal counsel for Nixon and was part of the impeachment and trial of Richard Nixon. Now, we're going to believe here Nadler's just finishing up opening comments and remarks where he's talking about you're now vetted, who these people are, blah, 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 blah. Here we go.
Chairman Nadler, excuse me, Ranking Member Collins. The last time I appeared before your committee was July 11, 1974.
That was the last time, and he's going to kind of give away what's going on here pretty quick.
During the impeachment inquiry of Richard Nixon.
Now, why is this man here? Because the last time a president was successfully impeached was 1974, Richard Nixon. Keep in mind, there was an impeachment proceeding up against Clinton where he was actually found to be lying. And we have the discussion of the word is. That was the funniest thing about the whole thing was the word is. What does the word is mean? That comes from Clinton. If you don't remember that, then you're probably not very old.
Clearly, I'm not here today as a fact witness.
Now, clearly, he's not there today as a fact witness. He is strictly there to talk about how the Nixon impeachment was, and he's only there to try and tie what's going on with Trump back. And I'm going to kind of go through some of this with you real fast here. This is Watergate. This is what Trump was overall impeached on. Watergate scandal was a major political scandal that occurred in the U.S. during 1972 to 1974, following a break-in by 5 men at the DNC headquarters at Watergate Office Complex in Washington, D.C., June 7, 1972, and President Richard Nixon's administration's subsequent attempt to cover up his involvement. Now, this is being used by the current Democrats to show a cover-up of a crime. There was actually a crime committed. Richard Nixon, through some funding, had people break in. After the 5 burglars were caught, the conspiracy was discovered, chiefly through the work of a few journalists, congressional staffers, and election finance official, watchdog official. Watergate was investigated by the Congress. Meanwhile, Nixon's administration resisted probes and led to a constitutional crisis. The scandal led to discovery of multiple abuses of power by members of the Nixon administration, a commencement of impeachment process against the president, and Nixon's resignation. The scandal also resulted in an indictment of 69 people with trials or pleas resulting in 48 being found guilty, many of whom were top Nixon officials. So, this man is there to relate Trump, the current president, back to Richard Nixon, and this whole thing took 4 hours, and I watched a lot of it, and I don't want to go through all of it today.
I accepted the invitation to come here today because I hope I can give a little historical perspective on the Mueller report.
Now, keep in mind that the Watergate scandal was related to a break-in by people and an attempted cover-up of Richard Nixon involvement. The Mueller report shows that Russians were interfering in the U.S. election in 2016, and after the Mueller report, there was found to be no evidence of collusion between the two parties. It was Russia was making attempts to collude with Trump, and Trump basically just knocked them off and moved on. However, due to the political nature of our system, and the fact that Trump is sort of the outsider presidential candidate that beat the Republicans out, you now see an establishment push to go against all of that, which I believe is very negative for the country as a whole, because in the actual Mueller discussion, he said he was unable to find the president innocent. Not unable to find guilt, he was unable to prove the president innocent, which is not how our legal system works, because you were perceived innocent until proven guilty. There were actually no charges made against the Trump campaign as related to collusion with Russia. All the indictments and all the things that happened were basically against things that happened before people were involved in the Trump election and such and so forth, so there's not a lot going on there. However, this man's entire testimony is to bring up Nixon and tie Nixon to Trump in a public way.
In many ways, the Mueller report is to President Trump what the so-called Watergate roadmap, officially titled the Grand Jury Report and Recommendation Concerning Transmission of Evidence to the House of Representatives, was to President Richard Nixon.
Now, the Mueller report, which was able to find no evidence of collusion between the U.S. and Russia, or the Trump campaign and Russia, is very different than the Watergate information, because they had criminal activity, and that criminal activity was then tied back to President Nixon, who then tried to impede the investigation into criminal activity, of which he was later tied to him and then through the impeachment process. The Mueller report found there was no evidence of collusion between Trump and Russia, and then everything falls not on the investigation of a crime, but on the possibility that there was some obstruction into an investigation which found no crime. So it's very different all around what's currently happening versus what happened then. An actual crime the president was covering up for versus no crime that the president was upset he was being investigated publicly. So that's kind of the thing there. First article comes from Bloomberg. Democrats are blowing their chance to investigate Trump. This is from Bloomberg. John Dean's testimony was terrible on television and worse politics. Democrats need to do better. The whole thing, what should be happening, here's what Norm Ortine suggested, who's a writer for The Atlantic. Democrats need to stage and coordinate hearings across committees and subcommittees to make sure they do not overload Americans' ability to pay attention. Most important, they need to structure the public hearings in a dramatically different way than usual. No 5-minute rounds of questioning going down to every line of every committee meter, leading to utterly disjointed discourse, making it easy for hostile witnesses to evade filibuster or otherwise avoid follow-ups and get through a 5-minute period, which is then followed by a 5-minute breather with an ally on the Republican side, and then another 5 minutes for the next member of the panel that may have nothing to do with the previous round of questions. Basically, if you want to make these things function the way you want them to go, from Bloomberg, is you need to change the whole process so that you don't follow the traditional rules and you get it more out there. Now, I found this very instructional. You're currently seeing a lot of articles, a lot of things pushing for an entire change in the way our political system works, because movement towards impeachment is what has to happen. Here is the Columbia Journalism Review. Democrats, John Dean's hearing is a flop. All right, here we go. James Comey, Blasey Ford, Brett Kavanaugh, Michael Cohen. In the Trump era, a handful of blockbuster congressional hearings have fixed us to our TV screens. Christina Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh, the lack of evidence, lack of cooperation, lack of anything substantive other than the fact that she said he did way back when. He said he didn't. No one was able to corroborate anything. Of course, Michael Cohen, the lawyer who is now in jail for attempting to obstruct, when he himself couldn't tie anything back to Trump because that wasn't what happened. He literally lied himself because he thought he was something special and thought maybe whatever. I don't know. He's very strange. John Dean's session before the House Judiciary Committee, the first in a series of hearings Democrats hope will dramatize the Mueller report to viewers, was never likely to be as captivating. Now, I do think that is something to take into account. Democrats hope this will dramatize the Mueller report for viewers. They want this to be a big show. They're looking for more of the I am Spartacus moments from Cory Booker, from Nader, from anyone. However, unfortunately, the facts aren't there. The evidence, the support's not there. Even the Democrat who called Dean would have preferred to hearing from Don McGahn, the White House counsel, blah, 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 or Mueller, who doesn't want to appear. Nonetheless, Democrats hope Dean, who served as Richard Nixon's White House counsel and played a key role in Nixon's downfall, would leave a mark on the public. So, they couldn't get anyone to say what they wanted who's in the current period. They dropped back 40 plus years to a Nixon person who, as he stated in the beginning, is not there as a factual reference. He is only there to hopefully tie an investigation which found no crime, no collusion, back to a investigation where there were arrests made, there was crime committed, and there was a definite evidence of a cover-up. That's why he's there. That's what he's doing, is to do that. And unfortunately, you can go and watch the video on CBS, and it is pretty much just bad drama. There's really nothing there. The historical parallels are obvious that they're trying to draw. There are no actual parallels between the two, because if an investigation starts with arrests, burglary, arrests coming in, and they're able to almost immediately tie that through, and then the president starts blocking, pushing back, shutting down the investigation, versus where they start with an investigation to try and prove something. The investigation goes on for roughly 2 years and finds no evidence of collusion, no conspiracy, no anything related. And then they have to fall back to the other was, we didn't find any crime, but there were some cutbacks to where Trump was kind of pushing back against the investigation overall. All of those seem to have went away, and that the president and everyone in the purview cooperated with the investigation. So there was no evidence. However, again, we keep having to reiterate this for people. He was unable to prove the president innocent, which is not the way our legal system works or has ever worked, because you are innocent until proven guilty. Imagine if everyone who went to court was guilty until proven innocent. The necessary investigation by the state would be kept at a bare minimum, because if you were guilty of a crime, unless you could prove yourself innocent, everything about our legal system is done. You want to talk about imprisonment rates and issues now? Imagine if we turned this system upside down, as the Mueller and the Mueller report attempted to do, by saying you can't prove someone innocent, even though there's no evidence of a crime, there's no tying anyone involved into any kind of crime. It's just hearsay and speculation from your political opponents. That is not how our system works. Here we go. But the premises that Dean hearing would grab attention was always flawed. While the viewing public needs a better grasp of the facts of the Mueller report, Dean has no place among these facts. Historical context can be highly instructive, but the public has hardly been deprived of Dean's perspective. He's a regular commentator on CNN, which leads him to be more of a political pundit these days. After he finished with the hearing, he went to Anderson Cooper's show to talk about it. So, as a political commentator for CNN, a group which has already been shown to have very much a skewed left wing bias, he goes back to CNN and then talks about everything he said. As Yashar Ali, a prominent freelance journalist, has tweeted, to think the testimony by John Dean would be an agenda setting and widely watched show is a detachment from reality. We currently are living in the era of no crimes being found and 24-hour coverage of it. It is moving on and on and on. And again, I go back to the impeachment process for Nixon. What this man was part of is there was a crime. Men were caught. The conspiracy was unraveled, and the president then pushed back and attempted to shut the investigation down repeatedly. And after a period of time, I believe here, sorry. A little slow on the uptakes every so often. Found wiretapping of the Democratic Party's headquarters. There was cover-up. Within hours of the burglar's arrest, FBI discovered Edward Hunt and Baker's. Nixon administration officials were concerned because Hunt and Libby were also involved in a separate secret known as the White House Plumbers, which was established to secretly leak to investigators and other sensitive security materials. Dean later testified that top Nixon aide John Reichman ordered him to deep six the contents of Howard Hunt's White House safe. Reichman subsequently denied this. In the end, Dean and FBI's acting director L. Patrick Gray, in separate operations, destroyed evidence from Hunt's safe. Nixon's own reaction to the break-in, at least individually, was that of skepticism. Watergate prosecutor James Neal was sure that Nixon had known in advance of the break-in. As evidence, he cited a conversation on tape from June 23rd between the president and his chief of staff, H.R. Handelman, in which Nixon asked, who was the asshole that did that? However, Nixon subsequently ordered Haldeman to have the CIA block the FBI's investigation into the source of funding of the burglary, which came, I believe, from, there we go, a money trail that led right back to him. So, differentiation between the two is, in our day of everything everywhere being saved forever, there was no evidence of a conspiracy, there was no money trail, there was no anything. It's just everything that can be looked up and found was, and in our days there's much more of a paper trail than ever before, and that is what they had this gentleman come on and do, talk for a little while, all while trying to reference his own stature as a CNN pundit, a paid provider of content to a news network onto television, off of television, to come in and discuss ways he thinks he can link the two together and then go back on television afterwards and talk about it. And this is the insanity we now live in. I don't see any correlation between the two where you can draw any direct lines from what happened at Watergate, where a crime was committed, caught, investigated, proof of crime was then presented, cover-up was then ensued, money trails, everything in Watergate was leading back to Nixon doing these things. And in the Mueller report, there's no evidence of collusion. The obstruction falls back to the fact that the president is upset that he's being investigated, and a lot of back and forth between him via Twitter. However, all the evidence that I've seen that comes to the Mueller report is actually from Trump officials, from the inner circle, all releasing information to them, and Trump himself submitting to the written questions from Mueller. And it's all over the place. I believe this is going to dominate the political time for the next year, and you're going to see more shutdown of any pro-conservative ideas, anything that is not more or less sustained via the more left-wing media types. And yeah, I don't know if this video does pretty good. I would like to cover this more because there's 4 hours here. I've watched all of it and it is fairly interesting. But this first man, the lead-off story, basically was a big nothing. Again, just like a lot of other news stories, there was nothing to it. It's just conjecture, talk, and nothing really is going to come from it. But that's where we're at in the world. So thank you all for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, dislike the video, do whatever you want to do. I'm not in charge of you. Thank you and have a great day.